David, thank you so much for being with us. Would you like to start by telling us where you're calling from this evening?
Thank you, Mark, and hi, everyone. I'm calling from Kampala, Uganda.
Yeah, you're calling Uganda. I was in Uganda in January, and it's a beautiful country, a rugged country. I enjoyed the heat, enjoyed the sun whenever I was there. I'm always interested in how people come to faith in Christ. So, just in a minute or two, could you just share with us how you came to faith in Jesus Christ?
Thank you. It happened when I was a teenager. In the intermediate school, we had primary, intermediate, and a high school. So I was about 15 years old when one of our teachers introduced a Bible study group in our school, and he invited a student to come and attend. So I was a regular, member of that group. And then one day he challenged us and he said, if we say we are Christians, we ought to read the Bible because the Bible is our constitution. So that I took up that challenge and went home and began reading. I had a small New Testament Bible. New Testament, I began reading from the Gospel of Matthew. Then when I reached chapter 18, I heard Peter ask Jesus and say, Lord, how many times should my brother sin against me and I forgive? And I had a voice inside me saying, David, do you know why Peter is asking? And I couldn't answer the question. And the voice told me, Peter was asking because he wanted to know the right thing so he could do the right thing. And then, David, do you know the right thing? Do you do the right thing? And I felt I have been away from God. I have been far from God. And I knelt down and I prayed and I said, God, forgive me. I want from now onward to hear your word, obey your word, and do what you want me to do. So I went back to the teacher the following day and I told him, this is what happened to me and this is the prayer I prayed. And then he told me, this is the new journey you have just started. So that's how I came to the Lord.
That's a wonderful story. I'm just thinking the importance of which teachers has in so many aspects of our lives, and it includes the spiritual aspect for you. And it's wonderful to have Christian teachers who influence kids in that way. David, despite the challenges which you have faced, and we'll probably talk a little more about that in a few moments, you've been able to engage in some serious academic study where, as I said earlier on, you hold a PhD, which was supported by Langham, I believe. How did you come to hear about Langham?
I came to hear about Langham because I had known about John Stott. Right. When I was in Sudan, I used to read some of his books, but it was a translated one in Arabic. I read Arabic very well because I schooled in Arabic. I started learning English later on when I was in high school. So I used to read his books, John Stott. I said, this man writes a very good, good material for Christians to build us up in ministry. So when I joined NEXT, that is the name of Africa International University in Nairobi. It used to be Nairobi Evangelical Graduate School of Theology. When I joined it, so I heard about John Stott Ministry and Langham. Then I asked, what's Langham, what John Stott Ministry? They said, it's actually John Stott Ministry that has become Langham. So when I enrolled for my PhD, I asked my university, I don't have anyone to support me. Is there anyone? They said, do you know about John Stott Ministry? I said, yes, I know about it. They said, you try them. So I applied once. The first time I didn't succeed in that. Then I applied it the second time. So this now when Dr. Ian Shaw wrote to me and said, David, I'm coming to Nairobi. I want to meet you. He came and met me and said, why do you want to have the PhD? I told him about my passion of, training leadership, church leadership in South Sudan, and also establishing a theological seminary and all that. And then he said, David, you have a very strong reason. We just pray that God will provide for you. So that's how my journey started with Langham. And Langham started to sponsor and support me when I was a student in Nairobi.
When was that, David? How long ago?
That was from 2011. That was from 2011.
Wow.
Because I joined the PhD program in 2010, but Langham started the support in 2011.
Amen. Lovely, lovely. Of course, following your doctorate studies, you served with the Africa Renewal University. Tell us a little bit about what you were involved with the AFU or ARU.
When I was done with my doctoral research in Nairobi, I was actually on my way to South Sudan because I wanted to go and stay there and do ministry. But South Sudan was not stable yet. And then one of my colleagues that was with me in Nairobi, he's a Ugandan. He told me, David, there is a college here which is about to become a Christian university. And we need someone to come and teach some subjects, in areas of biblical studies. And I know that's your area. Would you consider coming and be part of us? I said, let me just come and teach maybe an intensive course once, and then I move on. Then when I came, one thing led to another, and then I saw myself staying in Uganda, and I actually served as head of department theology. After that, I became the vice chancellor. Vice chancellor, I think the British system uses that. Americans would say president. I became the vice chancellor of Africa Renewal University from 2015. So until last year, which was 2022, when my contract expired. It expired, we renewed it, pushed it like twice, and then we reached an agreement that now time for me is up because the university had reached the level which I really wanted it to reach to obtain the charter. There is a charter that his government gives to every university here. So that's how I came to Africa Renewal University, and my role was to supervise the work which is going on, both academic and admin. So I was the officer in charge of the university, and also accountable for anything that happens in the university, and also connecting university to partners and also to the government, and representing the university in any forum.
Yeah, certainly. I seen the work of Africa Renewal University whenever I was in Uganda in January in Chiwiko and Arua. I had the privilege of being at 2 graduations and was able to see firsthand the support in which the Africa Renewal University gave to those 2 Bible institutes, and it was just wonderful to see that. Well, whenever I met you in January, Pastor, I remember you saying that although you had worked in higher education, your heart really lay with engaging with pastors on the ground, especially in Sudan and in South Sudan. And you have a new role with an organization called Africa Leadership and Reconciliation Ministries, where you are the vice president of programs and development. How is that role helping you to achieve your vision and your desire to serve pastors on the ground?
Alarm is a ministry which was formed as a result of the genocide which took place in 1994 in Rwanda. And Alarm was established because that genocide came as a result of Christians who were not discipled, because the majority of the people who took part in the genocide were actually Christian, but they were not discipled. So Alarm is engaged in training Christians, discipling Christians, training pastors, and also it is also involved in reconciliation ministries. So my being with Alarm comes because of that, because Alarm is actually involved in the ministry of training, which is my passion. And I see myself together with colleagues in Alarm doing the same thing that God has given into my heart, though my focus is on South Sudan and actually making sure that we have a school that can train people in these 2 countries, because I believe for so many reasons these 2 countries play great role in that region. If there are disciples of Christ in these 2 nations, Sudan will minister to the northern part of Africa, and South Sudan will minister to the southern part of Africa. So that is where my heart is, and Alarm supports what I do there.
Yeah. Of course, you're saying there that your work involves connecting with local churches where there is conflict, and you've mentioned Sudan and South Sudan there. And of course, Alarm was born out of the conflict in Rwanda, where conflict is just a matter of life, and people just experience it day in and day out. Could you give us an update on how the situation is in Sudan and South Sudan at the minute? Is there still fighting? Are they on ceasefire? And what average life is like at the minute in those countries?
Usually, when I talk about Sudan and South Sudan, I paint this picture to everyone, to anyone who is asking me, to just know the difference between the two countries. Yes. Sudan and South Sudan used to be one country until 2011, when South Sudan got its independence. Sudan is predominantly Muslim, and South Sudan is predominantly Christian. Right now in South Sudan, there has been two civil wars since independence. One was in 2013 and the other was in 2016. It was mainly because of power struggle and all that. But right now there is some sort of stability coming slowly to South Sudan. But Sudan in the north is now experiencing a lot of chaos because of the disagreement between the two generals who were ruling Sudan after the ouster of Omar al-Bashir. If you know, Omar al-Bashir was the president of Sudan until 2019, and he was ousted through demonstration, popular uprising, and then two generals came who were actually ruling. One was the leader and the other was the deputy, and the two have disagreed, and each of them is controlling some sort of power and army. So these two armies are now fighting, and because of this fight, many people are dying. Khartoum now has turned into a ghost city. I was actually in Khartoum a week before the war broke out, and there was already tension coming up. And I was there to train pastors, church leaders, and some of them now are writing to me sometimes, getting in touch with me through social media and all that. I really feel bad, but what is happening in Sudan, you can't even describe. It's not good at all. And people are not talking about it the way it's happening there on the ground. There is a lot happening there. People are dying, and there is a lot of chaos.
Yeah. We're so sad to hear that. As I was saying to you before we came onto the call, that Sudan was mentioned just for a couple of days in our Western media and sort of dropped off the media very quickly. And, you know, the focus has not been there on the situation. And you're right. The world should know what is going on there. I want us to think a little bit about the local church where there is war and where there is conflict. And of course, in the early days of any conflict, there's always confusion. And I guess the church individuals will go into a survival mode where they just try to literally keep their heads down. But as war progresses, the church usually finds herself, or should find herself, responding and serving those who have been affected by the conflict. So the question that I want to ask you, I guess, regarding the church in Sudan, is it at this time, is it in survival mode where it's keeping its head down, or is it moving towards supporting those who have been affected by the conflict?
I would say the church is trying its best to serve people who are affected by the conflict. Mm-hmm. In Sudan, right now, the church really has got nothing to do apart from encouraging people and praying maybe. But the church in Sudan also needs prayer and encouragement. Mm-hmm. I have talked to pastors there, to bishops there. They are saying, we are overwhelmed. Please, people, pray for us, encourage us, support us. So that's what is happening in Sudan right now, especially in Khartoum and in the northern part of Sudan, areas that are affected by the current conflict. The church is kind of paralyzed. The church doesn't know what to do, apart from saying, pray for us, encourage us. And that's what my colleagues there are telling me. In South Sudan, the church is actually trying to raise its head to serve the people, because the church is taking some steps to help people who are running from war from Sudan coming down to South Sudan. And the church is also trying to mobilize people around to see what can happen to the people who are actually returning, because there were South Sudanese in Sudan who are returning, and they are also refugees. Some of the churches have actually hosted people in the church premises. And also they are saying, now what do we do with these people? We have given them a shelter. They can sleep here, but they also need to eat. Sometimes they are sick and all that. So that's the struggle which is happening right now. But generally in South Sudan, the church is trying to get stronger, but it needs some push to get where it needs to be. That's what I see in Sudan, in South Sudan right now.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, you playing your part on training and leadership is playing a major part in that.
That's it. That's why we do this program of training leaders, church leaders. That's the way to me. That's what God has given me as the solution to that problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, you know, in any war situation, there's always a sense of injustice, loss, pain. That pain is in multiple layers. There's splits in family. I know you've experienced that in the past. There's displacement of people. I know in North Uganda, there's massive refugee camps, over 1 million people in those. Yes. And of course, the local church is not immune to any of that, because of course the church is made up of people. How's the local church dealing with those emotions and those actions where, although forgiveness is a core aspect and a core response of the Christian faith, yet whenever you're facing conflict, the desire or the want or the ability to forgive can be a million miles from what we want to do?
Mark, what the people of South Sudan or the church in South Sudan has experienced, I don't know even how to describe it. You have mentioned refugees in the northern part of Uganda. Whenever I visit them, I see real pain. People are in pain. People are separated. I am separated from some of my family members. Some of them who are in Sudan, they are in other parts of Sudan where they can't come to South Sudan. I am here in Uganda. Some of them are in South Sudan. So just scattered. You know, living together with a family, like you have your siblings with you, you have your dad with you, you have your own family with you around, you can visit each other easily. It's not happening because of either the road is not safe to go to where the others are, either maybe there is a conflict in this area or in that area, and that has caused a lot of trauma. One of the ministries that South Sudan needs right now, the church in South Sudan, is actually trauma healing. It needs a lot of trauma healing, you know, to console the pastors, to console the church, to console the church members. Yes, we have talked about forgiveness many times, you know, in our conferences, in our seminars, but there are people who are deeply wounded. And when you talk to them about forgiveness, they don't understand what you're talking about. They ask you, do you really know what I've gone through? And you're asking me to forgive. Some of them actually can burst, you know, just crying and telling you, I'm crying because of the pain in me, what I've gone through. I lost my dad, I lost my son, I lost this and that. So that's what has been going on. We really need to pray for the church in South Sudan and the people of South Sudan, and now Sudan also, so that the ministry of trauma healing, counseling takes place, and that God will be able to help these people recover and become who they ought to be.
Yeah. Certainly that's what we will be doing in a few moments whenever we go into our breakout groups. And I trust that those who are tuned in this evening will leave here and take South Sudan on their hearts and continue to pray for the church and for the church leaders and for leadership training that's so badly needed there. David, my final question for you is this. What lessons can we who are on this call this evening learn from the church in South Sudan and Sudan?
A number of lessons. One, I will say resilience. Despite the fact that the church has gone through a lot, the church is still serving God's people. There are people who have suffered so much for so many years, but they still hold the gospel dear to their hearts. They still serve God. They still love God. Some of them, they worship God, with the gladness, with gladness of the heart, not knowing what they are going to eat in the next minute or what is going to happen to them tonight. But you see them happily praising God and worshiping Him. I think this is something that the rest can learn. Depending on God and depending on the joy that comes from the gospel and the gospel alone. And saying that, you know what, I live for Christ despite the difficulties that I go through. That is something incredible that we can learn from the church in Sudan and South Sudan. The other one also is not giving up because of whatever problem that you are going through. If the church in Sudan and South Sudan, especially South Sudan, was to give up, it would have given up long ago. Because of 21 years, spending 21 years fighting the people of South Sudan and the church trying to reconcile the people and do ministry for 21 years, and the church still preaches the same message, encourages people. I just say, God, I thank you for the church in Sudan and South Sudan. That's the little I would say that I would ask the rest to learn from the church in Sudan and South Sudan.
Yeah, certainly. That's something that's been very close in my heart as I've thought about what can the church in conflict areas teach us. And resilience is the thing that comes back to my mind time and time again. That Sudan and the Christians in Sudan and South Sudan and in conflict areas, they have counted the cost, and they think that the cost is willing to pay. And I think that's a great challenge for us who live in very comfortable West, the very comfortable West. David, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed talking to you again.